The sharp, percussive knocks were a violent intrusion, shattering the tranquil symphony of a Saturday morning. One moment, Marcus was savoring the rich aroma of his coffee, the steam curling in a sunbeam that cut across his pristine kitchen. The next, the sound, bang, 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 echoed to the halls of his new home, a sound more akin to a battering ram than a friendly greeting. Marcus, a hard-working black man in his early 30s, had poured his savings and his soul into this quiet suburban ranch house. After years of navigating the relentless noise and pace of the city, the silence here had been a tangible reward. He had earned this peace. Setting his mug down with a soft click, he felt a prickle of unease. No one visited unannounced here. That was part of the appeal. When he opened the heavy oak door, the sight that greeted him was meticulously constructed to convey authority, yet it set off every internal alarm. 3 men stood rigidly on his welcome mat, dressed in uniforms that were almost convincing. The dark blue shirts had patches that read Community Security, and shiny, gold-colored badges were clipped ostentatiously to their belts. They were equipped with a full theater of officialdom, crackling walkie-talkies, a thick clipboard bristling with papers and stern, unsmiling expressions. The one in the center, a man with a tight jaw and cold eyes, did the talking. "Sir, we're with the HOA enforcement unit," he barked, his tone leaving no room for question. He didn't make eye contact, instead scanning the interior of Marcus's home over his shoulder. "You're in multiple violations of community codes. This is a zero-tolerance precinct. You need to gather your essentials and leave the premises immediately for further inspection." Marcus's initial shock curdled into a hard, cold knot of suspicion in his gut. He had been paranoid about the rules. Frankly, before closing, he had read the HOA covenant cover to cover twice. He knew the exact regulations on trash can placement, mailbox style, and the permissible shade of beige for exterior trim. His lawn was freshly mowed, his hedges trimmed, his new car parked perfectly in the driveway. There was nothing to violate. Immediately, Marcus asked, his voice steady though his heart was hammering against his ribs. He kept his body firmly in the doorway, blocking their entry. "What's the specific violation? I'd like to see the citation, please." The man's eyes flickered to his companions, a barely perceptible shift that screamed improvisation. "The notice is being processed. This is an emergency compliance issue. We've had reports of suspicious activity," he stated, his gaze now deliberately drifting over Marcus's face, as if assessing a threat. And that's when the pieces snapped together. The overly aggressive demeanor, the vague, unverifiable claims, the demand for him to leave his own home without a shred of documentation. This wasn't about a violation. It was about his presence. The uniform performance on his porch was for the benefit of any watching neighbor, a pantomime of legitimacy designed to mask a far uglier truth. These men weren't asking. They were demanding. And something about them, the poorly fitted uniforms, the lack of any official vehicle, the sheer audacity of their request, felt profoundly and dangerously off. This wasn't enforcement. This was something else entirely. And Marcus realized with chilling clarity that the chaos he thought he'd escaped had simply learned to wear a uniform. The leader, a man with a thin, severe mouth, jabbed a finger toward Marcus's driveway. "The primary violation is the number of vehicles. This is a 2-car maximum driveway. You have 3. Marcus followed his gaze to his own sedan, his wife's SUV, and his brother's pickup truck, which he was borrowing for a weekend project. It was a temporary, logical sight, yet they presented it as a cardinal sin. Another man, younger and twitchier, chimed in, gesturing vaguely at the lawn. "And the turf. It's a 1/4 inch over code. Unacceptable." His eyes then scanned the siding. "And we had complaints about the paint color. It's non-compliant with the community's earth tone palette." The accusations were so absurdly petty, they circled back to being menacing. Marcus's paint was desert dune, a color he had specifically selected from the HOA's own pre-approved swatch list. The leader, seeing his skepticism, waved a clipboard under his nose. The top sheet was a poorly photocopied form filled with blurry text and a smudged, unreadable signature at the bottom. "It's all right here. Fines are accruing by the minute. Thousands of dollars. Now, You can come voluntarily, or we can escalate. We have direct dispatch to the county sheriff. The threat was clear. Comply, or we will weaponize real law enforcement against you. It was a bluff, Marcus was sure, but a dangerous one. In that moment, he understood their entire strategy. To overwhelm him with bureaucratic-sounding nonsense, threaten financial ruin and police involvement, and bully him into surrendering his own property. Their hope was that confusion and fear would do their work for them. Marcus didn't budge an inch. He planted his feet more firmly on his own welcome mat, his voice dropping into a low, steady register that cut through their bluster. "This is my house," he repeated, each word measured and solid as a brick. "The deed is in my safe. The mortgage is with my bank. The HOA dues are paid automatically every month. You are not taking me out of here. You want to call the sheriff? Please do it. I'll wait right here." A flicker of uncertainty passed between the three men. Their script hadn't accounted for such calm, immovable resistance. The leader's face hardened, his performative authority crumbling into raw aggression. "You're making a big mistake," he snarled, taking a deliberate step forward, invading Marcus's personal space. The other two mirrored him, forming a semicircle of intimidation. The twitchy one's hand dropped to his belt, resting on the handle of a heavy, black baton. The metallic shick of it loosening in its clasp was a sound meant to terrify. Out of the corner of his eye, Marcus saw the telltale flutter of a blind across the street. A curtain in the house next door shifted slightly. He could feel the weight of silent, watching neighbors, their presence a vacuum of inaction. They were spectators, curious and cautious, but they would not intervene. He was on his own. What these men, in their cheap costumes and cheaper threats, could never have anticipated was a brotherhood Marcus carried in his phone. While maintaining eye contact with the leader, his left hand, hidden behind the doorframe, found his cell phone in his pocket. Muscle memory guided his thumb. No emergency call, not yet. Instead, he pressed a single speed dial number and then the power button 3 times in quick succession, a prearranged distress signal he hadn't ever thought he'd need to use. The message was instantly received 5 miles away, where former Sergeant David Carter and his cousin, a former MMA instructor named Ben, were loading gear into a truck for a fishing trip. The allure on their screens wasn't text, but a location pin and a single word. Now. The fake cops saw a lone man standing in the doorway. They didn't see the silent alarm that had just been tripped. They didn't see the 2 men, forged in discipline and raw power, abandoning their gear and sprinting to a car, their minds already shifting into a tactical mode they knew all too well. The clock was ticking, and it was ticking. The phone felt cool and solid in Marcus's palm, a lifeline in the surreal standoff. He kept his eyes locked on the leader, whose sneer was faltering under the weight of Marcus's unnerving calm. With his free hand hidden behind the door, Marcus navigated his contacts by feel alone. He found the name he needed and pressed call, holding the phone to his ear. It rang once before a cheerful, booming voice answered. "Marcus, my man, you finally gonna help me break in that new grill?" "Tony," Marcus said, his voice a low, controlled murmur, a stark contrast of tension on his porch. "I've got a situation. 3 guys on my porch, fake HOA cops. They're trying to evict me right now." The line went silent for a fraction of a second. When Anthony Tony Rivera spoke again, every ounce of casual warmth had been vacuumed out. What remained was a voice of flat, chilling clarity, a tool he'd honed in far more dangerous places than suburban street. Description: now. Blue fake security uniforms, badges on belts. 1 leader, mid-40s, thin mouth. 2 others, one twitchy, one big. The twitchy one has a baton. They're aggressive. Weapons. Just a baton. So far. Sit tight, Marcus. Do not engage. Keep them talking. We're on the way. The line went dead. There were no questions, no panic. Only emission parameters received and acknowledged. Across town, Anthony Rivera was in his garage, polishing a classic Mustang. He didn't run. He moved with a lethal, economical grace, tapping a button on a dedicated comms unit mounted on the wall. All points, Rivera. Code gray. Civi distress. 114 Pinecrest Drive. 3 hostiles, impersonating Elio's, armed with at least one impact weapon. On me. Now. He didn't wait for replies. He was already in his black Ford Raptor, the engine roaring to life. He wasn't just a former Navy SEAL. He was the hub of a network. 5 other men, his brothers from teams past, had chosen to retire to the same area, a quiet pact of mutual support. They were scattered within a 5-minute radius, a contractor, a security consultant, a fitness guru, and within 60 seconds of Anthony's call, 5 other vehicles, a Jeep Wrangler, 2 more trucks, and SUV, diverted from their Saturday routines. They weren't in uniform, but they were on a mission. Back on the porch, the leader grew impatient. Who you calling, pal? Your lawyer? Doesn't matter. You're out of compliance. He took another step, but Marcus held his ground, a faint, unshakable calm settling over him. He'd done his part. The cavalry was coming. The first sound was the deep, guttural rumble of a high-performance engine turning onto the street. Then another, and another. Not the wail of sirens, but the ominous, converging purpose. 6 vehicles, all black or dark gray, rolled to stop in a loose, tactical perimeter around Marcus's property. Doors opened in near unison. 6 men emerged. They wore jeans, athletic shirts, and baseball caps, but their build, their posture, their razor-sharp awareness betrayed them. They moved with relaxed lethality, their calm, assessing eyes taking in the entire scene. The 3 imposters, Marcus in the doorway, the peeking blinds, in a single, sweeping glance. They didn't yell. They didn't brandish weapons. They simply fanned out and walked forward, a silent, immovable force. Anthony led, his eyes fixed on the man with the baton. The air grew thick, the previous confrontation now seeming like a childish argument. The 3 fake cops froze. Their bluster evaporated, replaced by raw, undisguised panic. They were bullies who had just stumbled into a special forces operation. The leader's clipboard hung limply at his side. The man with the baton slowly, very slowly, moved his hand away from his belt. Anthony stopped a few feet away, his voice quiet yet carrying authority that shook the very foundation of the imposter charade. "We're the neighborhood watch," he said, his tone icy and flat. "You have about 10 seconds to explain who you are and what you're doing on our friend's property." The real confrontation had finally arrived. The air on the porch, once thick with the fake authority of the imposters, underwent a seismic shift. It wasn't a sound or a movement, but a change in pressure, as if the atmosphere itself had been replaced with something heavier and more dangerous. The 3 men, who moments before had been puffed up with aggressive bluster, seemed to physically deflate. Their bravado evaporated, leaving behind a pallid, sweating fear. They were looking at 6 men who moved with a silent, coordinated purpose that their cheap costumes could never hope to emulate. Anthony took 2 more steps forward, his movement economical and precise. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone carved out a sphere of absolute authority. His eyes, cold and assessing, flicked from the fake badges to the clipboard, to the baton, cataloging every detail as a potential threat. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble that carried further than any shout. "You got about 5 seconds to explain why you're impersonating law enforcement and trespassing on private property." The leader's mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping on a dock. We're the HOA enforcement unit," he stammered, the words sounding hollow and ridiculous now. He fumbled with the clipboard, thrusting the smudged paper toward Anthony. "It's official business. He's in violation." Another SEAL, a man named Cruz with sharp gaze that missed nothing, moved in. He didn't touch the man, but leaned forward slightly, peering at the badge clipped to his belt. "This is a toy," Cruz stated, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You bought this online. The seal is wrong. The typeface is wrong." His eyes lifted to meet the imposters, holding him in an unbreakable stare. "You're not real cops. Impersonating an officer is a felony. Trespassing with intent to intimidate? That's going to add some time." The 3rd imposter, the twitchy one, made a jerky movement toward his radio, perhaps out of sheer habit or panic. Before his hand could even touch it, another SEAL, a mountain of a man named Jessup, simply shook his head once, a minute, negative gesture. The man's hand froze in midair. They were surrounded, not by a mob, but by a perfectly contained perimeter of controlled power. Every potential route of escape was casually blocked by a man who looked capable of stopping a charging bull. "I think it's time we let the real professionals sort this out," Anthony said, his tone leaving no room for debate. He nodded to Ben, who was already on his phone, his voice calm and clear as he spoke to the 911 dispatcher. "Yes, ma'am. We have a situation at 114 Pinecrest Drive. 3 individuals impersonating law enforcement, attempting to illegally evict a homeowner. The situation is contained. Please send units." The minutes until the real police arrived were an eternity of silent humiliation for the fake cops. They stood trapped in a loose circle of SEALs who looked utterly relaxed, yet whose eyes never left them. One of the SEALs crossed his arms, his biceps straining the fabric of his shirt. Another simply leaned against a truck. Sipping from a bottle of water he produced from nowhere, as if this were a mildly interesting interlude in his day. They didn't need to posture or threaten. Their complete and utter control of the situation was a palpable force. When the first squad car finally rounded the corner, lights flashing silently, the 3 imposters looked almost relieved, their shoulders slumped in surrender. 2 real police officers stepped out, their hands resting on their duty belts. Taking the surreal scene, 3 shaking men in pathetic costumes, surrounded by 6 incredibly fit, calm individuals, with a relieved homeowner watching from his doorway. Anthony met the lead officer halfway. "Officer," he said, with a respectful nod, "we're just the neighbors. These gentlemen were just explaining their version of events. We have them all on video for your review." He gestured to a small camera one of his teammates had discreetly mounted on a truck's dashboard. The imposter's fate was sealed not by fists, but by flawless, calm, and utterly overwhelming procedure. The arrival of the genuine police introduced a new, formal layer of authority to the chaotic scene. The 2 uniformed officers, initially cautious as they assessed a ring of imposing men, were quickly briefed by Anthony. His delivery was crisp, factual, and devoid of emotion, a professional debrief. He presented the fake badges, the fraudulent documents, and the damning video evidence from the dashboard camera. It took the officers less than 5 minutes to confirm Marcus had been telling the truth all along. A call to the actual HOA management company confirmed they had no enforcement unit, and certainly no team operating on a Saturday morning. A check of the imposters' IDs revealed they were from a neighboring county. They didn't just work outside the HOA, they were complete outsiders. Their story unraveled completely when one of them, the twitchy one, cracked under the pressure and confessed it was a scam. They had targeted new homeowners, particularly those who might feel isolated or uncertain, using intimidation and the veneer of authority to scare them into handing over immediate fines, or, in more brazen attempts, to vacate the property for a full inspection, after which they would loot the place. Thanks to Marcus's preternatural calm in the face of their aggression and the sudden, undeniable presence of 6 Navy SEALs who materialized like guardian angels in tactical trucks, the scheme had reached its ignoble end. The 3 men were read their rights, handcuffed with metallic finality, and placed in the back of a police cruiser, their heads bowed in defeat. In the days that followed, the neighborhood underwent a profound transformation. The silent, watching neighbors who had peeked through their blinds emerged, sheepish at first, then increasingly vocal. They approached Marcus not with pity, but with respect and gratitude. A woman from across the street brought over a casserole. The man next door, a retired accountant, apologized for not acting, admitting he thought it was a dispute between Marcus and the association. The incident became a catalyst, shattering the polite distance that often defined suburban life and forging a stronger, more aware community. The Real HOA board, deeply embarrassed and horrified that their community's name had been used for such a racist and criminal scheme, issued a formal apology to Marcus. They immediately implemented new protocols. All official personnel would carry digitally verified identification. All visits would be logged with central office, and a community-wide alert system was established to warn residents of potential scams. And Marcus? He became a quiet hero. He hadn't thrown a punch or fired a shot. His victory was won with nerve, intelligence, and the strength of his community. He had protected his home, the sanctuary he'd worked so hard for, not through violence, but by standing his ground and knowing who to call. He showed everyone that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the ability to think clearly in spite of it, and that sometimes the greatest power lies in the brotherhood you build. The story, as these things do, spread online. News outlets picked it up, and the headline was too incredible not to share. Fake HOA cops try to evict black homeowner, end up surrounded by Navy SEALs. It was a story that resonated, a perfect storm of injustice, cool-headed resilience, and ultimate, almost karmic justice. People celebrated it not just as a wild tale, but as a powerful symbol. A man's right to his home, his dignity, and his safety, defended by the very best of friends against the very worst of intentions.